Okay, here's what I see happening so far.
Okay.
Matthew chapter 5, Jesus is laying out this kingdom manifesto, and he's saying, these are the values of my Father's kingdom. It's a kingdom based on a different set of assumptions than your world kingdom stuff. And so all the values and priorities are flipped on their head. And then he talks about what it looks like to live out those kingdom priorities in terms of basic morality, like naughty and nice. And he says that just ticking the boxes of, I didn't do a naughty thing today, really isn't sufficient. It's not the complete understanding of the kingdom or what God was saying even in the Old Testament. And he takes it to the level of the heart, which demonstrates our inability to truly do it, but also pushes us toward motivation level obedience. So he does that with external morality. Then in chapter 6, he flips it around and he gets into religious practice, giving, prayer, fasting, stuff like that. And again, right to the level of the heart, this is what those things look like in light of kingdom values.
Yep.
Then he gets to the second half of chapter 6, and he talks about your stuff in light of kingdom values. And each of these things is successively flipped on its head. And as we get into chapter 7, the opening foray here is a discussion of what our relationships look like in light of kingdom values, what roles they play. And right off the bat, we get into one of the most famous things in the whole Bible that everybody's heard of, and that everybody has employed at some point or another to get somebody to back off because you're judging me, and that's the don't judge stuff. So is this Jesus saying, leave the thinking to me, don't judge things, don't evaluate things, and simply engage in a version of Christianity that is devoid of critical thought? Or is it the opposite? And if so, how can it mean that?
Good. Yeah, your question, I think, sets it up. You know, obviously, he's asking us to make judgments.
Everywhere else.
Everywhere else and here. So why do you see the speck that's in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that's in your own eye? There's no moral equivalence here. There's stuff that, these things are different. And he's asking us to make assessments. And he's not saying, hey, look, if you know somebody that's in your Christian community and they're having trouble, he's saying, oh, no, don't say anything. He's saying, be honest about your own stuff first.
Okay.
I would argue that he's actually saying, you maybe should say something, but you should be honest about your own stuff first. And then he uses that hyperbole of a speck and a log.
Okay, I'm tracking. So your read on this passage, the very famous, why do you look at the speck and ignore the log in your own eye? And he goes on to say, you hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you'll be able to see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. So your read on this is that this is not the old, let's be wildly permissive in this circle of relationships so that nobody feels judged. Like, no judgment here.
Yeah.
What that usually means is we're all doing crazy crap.
Yeah.
Like, we're doing insane stuff, and that's why there's no
and we don't want to make each other feel guilty.
And it won't work, and so it's a like circle of enablement. Or at least that's what it's meant when I've done it.
Yeah.
And so your suggestion is that what we're ramping up to here is the ability to rightly speak into somebody else's life.
Right.
Okay.
So here's what I'd say. And he says, deal with your own issues. First, take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. The full expectation is you will help. Now it's to a brother, and in the context here, he's talking to the disciples. So this isn't just everybody, but people who come into the community of Christ. I think this should be part of the expectation, is that we willingly allow ourselves to be critiqued by one another. So this isn't about going outside the community, but speaking to that stuff. And the expectation is you will. But when you start out by acknowledging your own problems, it totally changes how you go about addressing,
How so?
going to somebody else. Well, you start out with humility. If my life is a mess and I'm honest about it, I don't really want to go talk to somebody else.
But wouldn't it then be easy for somebody else to say, like, yeah, okay, thanks for acknowledging your life is a mess before you speak into mine, but your life is still a mess. Like just, you've acknowledged it, like, it's good for you, cool. But I don't know, it's like when Lando is being sucked into the Sarlacc pit and Han just got unfrozen caveman space lawyered. He's got that laser blaster and he's trying to help Lando, and Lando's like, I thought you were blind. And Han's like, it's gonna be fine. I'm just gonna shoot at stuff right here. Things that are wrapped around your leg. It should be great. But Lando's critique in that situation is like, okay, well, thanks for admitting that you're blind, but you're not, like, you're just not in a position to do this well. It's not about humility or not humility.
Sure.
Like, you're not positioned to do a good job at shooting, pit monster tentacles off of my leg right now.
Being part of the community, being part of this thing called the kingdom, is we're opening ourselves up, and the expectation that we try to help one another. I think the qualification there is the log in your own eye first. That should push us back to what we talked about in the Beatitudes, being poor in spirit, being humble, being merciful.
Okay, all right.
It shapes the way I go in humility, and just almost a reticence to really bring that up with people.
That's a good point, connecting that back to the very first verse, the cipher of the whole thing, blessed are the poor in spirit.
Yeah, I totally get what you're going. So the flip side of that, to push back against your pushback,
good,
is you could use that as an excuse all day to never actually do anything, and I've known lots of people that have done that too. I've known lots of people who are very eager to offer helpful Christian advice to everybody, and just everybody knows, like, you're not the person who should be giving advice. And I've known too many people also who say, well, it's not my position, and they use that because they're just a personality, or they grew up in a home that they couldn't deal with conflict, and so issues never get dealt with.
Yeah.
So this is where you can make a rule, and it's, well, then you have to nuance it to the nth degree, or you just say wisdom needs to know which one to apply at which time.
That's just delicate.
It is.
It is not hard to misstep when feeling like everything's cleared out,
good
I'm
way
ready
to
to
say
speak.
That is a good
into
way
somebody
to say
else's life. You take a risk, but honestly, being in community, being in Christian community, either is a risk.
And I think that, to me, is a takeaway, is that this whole thing funnels us together in a way that's kind of scary. Because I have to put myself out to help others, and I have to put myself out to be helped. And especially if I'm going to help, then I'm more.
Yeah.
I open myself up even more. But it funnels us into a healthy cycle.
But
it's delicate, and it's scary.
It's interesting job-wise to listen to two people like us talk about this. Because this is not hypothetical to us.
Oh, no.
It's not hypothetical watching other people bumble through this. It's not hypothetical watching us bumble through this. This is a part of my weekly vocational rhythm, is trying to constantly have to think through, am I being a rat puke right now? What are the planks here? Because I'm constantly called upon to speak into other people's lives, which means there's this crippling, frustrating process of constantly having to acknowledge my own stupid stuff, which in a way I'd much rather just let sit there. So I guess what I'm driving at is part of the beauty of this thing that Jesus is saying is, if you really are living in Christian community, you are forced to constantly evaluate your stuff. It doesn't mean I'm going to get it right, but I'm forced to acknowledge it's there. I'm forced to think about it all the time.
Yeah.
Because I'm watching other people get stuff right and other people struggle.
Yeah. And I think it forces us back to 5:3, which is poor in spirit. It just keeps going back to that. And to me, that's, if you've heard this phrase, preach the gospel to yourself. I don't know if you've heard people use that language. I think Jerry Bridges was maybe the first to use that language, but the idea, you continually remind yourself that you are a sinner in need of grace, and you continually remind yourself,
you are but a man, you are but a man, you are but a man.
Oh, what was that?
It's like the guy who whispers in Julius Caesar's ear to remind him.
Yeah. So we remind ourselves of
your poor in spirit,
of your poor in spirit, and when we that poor in spirit, we're in need of grace. I'm saved by grace. I'm in need of grace and I'm saved by grace.
Yeah.
And, and so you constantly remind yourself of that. So it funnels us towards that. And
Okay.
the reciprocal of that is any denial of that gets really unhealthy quickly.
Yes. But obviously, that was a lame question I asked earlier because it's such a softball. Like, obviously, Jesus can't possibly mean don't think thoughts or evaluate things.
Well, at this point in the day, I'm only about good for softballs, so that's okay.
Okay. But what I think is interesting is that in light of the kingdom, the call all along has been to kingdom effectiveness. You participate in this. Mm-hmm. So remember, chapter 5, right after the Beatitudes, here are the kingdom values. Mm-hmm. Then he's like, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Mm-hmm. So right from the beginning, Jesus is like, here are these truths. You are the ambassadors and agents
and
of this. You are sons and daughters of God. This is your role in the kingdom. Mm-hmm. So the expectation is that there is agency and that we're doing things. And I think what we're getting into here is, with what we just looked at and what we're just about to look at, are two different ways that we can shipwreck that agency. One way, in relationships, that we can shipwreck our agency for the kingdom is to go around and just be a hypercritical jerk whose judgmentalism runs so contrary
Never
to...
seen that.
No, it's not really a thing.
Never done that.
Never done that. Where our judgmentalism runs so contrary to the values of the kingdom that we're discrediting the whole thing. We look like idiots and we're counterproductive to it all. So one way is to be too eager to judge everything. But then you flip around to one of the weirdest little sentences in the whole Bible that causes all kinds of controversy. And I think what you're seeing here is another way to get it wrong in the other direction and to shipwreck your effectiveness as an agent of the kingdom. Don't give to dogs what is sacred. Don't throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. So what I'm suggesting is that extreme way to screw up number one is hyper-judgmentalism. The other way to screw it up is to be completely undiscerning and unable to detect what's actually going on in your relationships, and to fall in with people who want nothing to create a vortex, but to create a vortex of destructiveness and to suck other people into this vortex of destructiveness. It sounds mean to even acknowledge that those people exist, but Aaron, do those people exist?
Sadly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's certainly a take on it.
That's certainly a take on it. Oh my goodness, that's the worst review I've ever heard from you. Okay.
I don't disagree with you.
Tell me the right take.
I don't know if I have a different
Those
one.
certainly are words a human could say in that order.
So again, by video A, we run out of tags.
Whatever, you're good. How do you read it? What's your typical read on how these two verses fit
I don't
together?
have anything different. What I was trying to think of is if that is the antithesis of going too far, of being too judgmental. I think, so the way I look at it, it is tied, because don't throw your pearls before pigs. Wow, there's a lot of judgment in that.
Yes.
There's a lot of moral assessment. So the way that 7:1 is thrown out is, hey, don't try to come at me and make any moral assessment about me. That's the way it's thrown out. It's really clear here that he wants us to make moral assessments. There's no way to dodge that.
Yes.
I think what you said is certainly one way that we miss that.
What's another? What's another read on this?
I hadn't given any thought to that line. That's the extent of my wisdom.
That's all right.
Yeah.
It's hard.
But yeah,
And you know what? I like that in this conversation, people are seeing that it's hard. Some people take this passage and they're like, oh, if somebody decides they don't like Jesus and they get really aggressive about it, that's when it's time to move on. But we're not talking about evangelism here at all. We're talking about relationships amongst
human relationships
amongst believers.
And that is...
And so I feel like the warning is, don't take your best, most precious stuff, like your deep, dark secrets, your regrets, your failures. Don't take your most precious stuff, like
I think
your hopes, your dreams. Don't get sucked into the vortex of crazy and damaging. It's a level of trust thing. It doesn't mean don't care about those people or reject them or don't try to be helpful. It means levels of partnership here. Like, let's use some judgment. There are people you can partner with at the most intimate level because they're absolutely trustworthy and they want the kingdom value thing and they're pulling in that direction. There are other folks, not quite there. Maybe we partner a little bit more safely there. And there are other folks who are, no, just into total wanton destructiveness and want to suck people into their crazy vortex of drama and damage and insanity. And probably just not best to partner there at all. You don't hate those people. You don't be mean. Like, you don't just treat people like garbage, but you keep your distance. And this instruction, I think, is really liberating if I'm reading it right. It's okay to keep your distance at times.
This seems like it's wise.
Yeah.
Because it'll tank you.
Yep.
And that's I think where the warning goes is they'll turn and trample you to pieces.
Yep.
Is it eventually if you're not wise, and I don't think it has to be just, people that want to suck you into a vortex. I think it could be kind of, it's not just one, I think there could be different expressions.
I think that's fair.
Of that, and that's maybe what was like, that wouldn't have been the first example I would have thought of, but I think it is a true one. But the point is, why would we do that if people need our help? And we're not the savior, and we can't rush into everybody's life and rescue them from their crazy or their problems or whatever it is. And at a point, you got to realize this is only going to ruin me, and I'm not going to help them or anybody else.
Which fits in the larger picture here, that by this point, relationships are something that we view through the lenses of kingdom stuff, and we avoid extremes that could shipwreck our effectiveness. I think that's the call. That beep means that we need to be quiet and get on to the next video.
Okay.
So I'm going to shut it down right there. Next one up is, Ask, Seek, Knock. This is going to be fun.
Okay.
All right, time out there. I'm Matt. It's 10-Minute Bible Hour.
I'm Aaron, and I'm
still the 10-Minute Bible Hour, I guess.
You're with a 10-hour Bible
no,
hour
stop.
at this
No,
point?
well, yeah, we actually are getting close. All right, next one up. See you soon.